Welcome to another OCD Recovery Instagram Live. I'm going to be talking a little bit today about what I imagine, which is completely a guess because it's completely uncertain what will be involved in the future. But what I imagine will be the future of OCD treatment. And when I say future, I'm talking decades into the future, where I think that OCD treatment will be going and which kind of angles. Now, if we went back 10 or 20 years, most people would have said, oh, I'm waiting for a tablet, I'm waiting for a pill. Well, that would have been based on the fact that we've been used to taking SSRIs and so on, and benzodiazepines and those kind of drugs. So we've got used to drugs being the OCD treatment in the future, the so-called things that we think would change things. And in terms of a cure, well, OCD is most likely a biological, genetic thing in the brain, which although I can't tell the difference between having OCD or not now, it's still there in the sense that it will still raise its head from time to time for a few seconds where it's trying to bite you and then going down again. And that doesn't mean that you're cured by any means. You could always follow through the cycle of OCD and get caught up in that again. You can do that, so you won't be cured of it, but you won't be able to tell the difference in your life when you're living in the position now where I am and where many are, between having OCD or not. That position feels that there's no chronic anxiety or chronic guilt cycle. You may get intrusive thoughts, but not intensely and not constantly. Because with those, the brain starts to stop sending those out as it knows that you're no longer frightened or afraid or trying to resist those. So that goes down. Now, in relation to the future, what would happen? Well, if we take it, for example, that there is a genetic situation in the brain with OCD, where there is a genetic thing, cure would need to actually change the genes. So, and I'm not an expert on these fields. This is just from my own knowledge of these and how I see things changing. But I'm not an expert on any of these. But I imagine in the future, when you see DNA splicing, the likes of CRISPR and so on, you'll be able to change inherited gene conditions such as OCD, which I imagine will change in the future with the likes of that as that comes in. The other thing that I think will be the big game changer, which is pretty happening now, and starting to be a part of the process, and something that I've been researching a lot about and looking into how we're going to go into that, because I definitely want to introduce that at some point and look at how that can be introduced, is virtual reality for OCD. It's already being tested at the moment, but it's not mainstream yet, for exposure therapy using virtual reality. Now, obviously, that relies on having virtual reality scenarios that target the specific OCD beliefs. So unless that's been designed correctly and they've got a really good understanding of OCD, which I imagine they've got a reasonable understanding of it, I don't imagine they've covered it from all the angles that it could be, and that's what I look to try and change and to work with when that virtual reality is being introduced, which is kind of now, but not mainstream yet, where it's really effective. But I imagine I've seen huge success with people with PTSD and virtual reality, as incredible advancements in that, where it's very helpful for taking, say, maybe a soldier back to a war zone, using virtual reality, replaying in the company of a therapist, guiding what's happening in relation to the sounds he heard, the things he saw at the time, his beliefs around those situations. You can talk the person through it. So re-showing them that actually the thing that disturbed them at the time was the irrational belief they took at that time, and this is how they could perceive it differently, and this is how it actually was instead of how they interpret it, and so on and so on. There's a lot that could be done there. So I think that you'll see virtual reality definitely advancing in relation to OCD. That's definitely the next step. Then if you look at, say, the likes of Elon Musk, with his neural lace, the neural lace, well, it's not idea, because they're doing development and working to bring that out, where basically you will have a chip that will be inserted into the brain, and that will that will be able to then sort of stream data straight from the cloud into the brain. So you'll be able to upload you'll be able to I mean, we're held back by the speed of our hands. So when we're using phones and reading, we're held back by the speed we read, the speed of our hands, and the speed that we understand. Well, when you'll be able to get in directly like that, you will be able to get the information. So you'd be able to, all the books on my reading list would be downloaded into your brain very fast. You could download anything, people's experiences of working with OCD, all the different things that they need to know, all the therapy, everything could be downloaded in an instant to the brain, which would obviously make recovery and treatment very fast. Then it would allow, I imagine in the future, they'll be able to then do access where they can see how we're thinking and make adaptations there. So from a therapy point of view, that would be in the future what for very effective in therapy point of view. Then you've got obviously the gene splicing, which would change OCD itself in the form of how it is in the brain, I imagine. And then you're going to see huge differences of, obviously, because you're connected right into the brain, you'd be able to influence specifically anxiety, depression, and how all those things are handled. So I imagine that will be the game changer in terms of technology there. I'm sure there'll be much more developments in the form of medicine, and as we have sort of bots that go around our body, chest testing for blood pressure changes and diseases and everything on a very small level, we will be able to do, we're becoming, as the likes of Elon Musk say, we are becoming like the cyborg in the sense that we have the phone in our hand and we're working on our phone all the time. So we're already part robot in the sense that because the phone's in our hand, we're already the computer. It's already part of us. We don't, when we were at school and they said, well, you won't have a calculator in the future. Well, we've got more than a calculator in our hand all the time. So as you've got that hand attachment, we've already become a bit like the robot. And so that will be the future. It will be more and more stuff. Even if you look at, for example, what I'm doing here with Instagram and social media, the way that we're getting information, I'm getting information from me here to anyone around the world wasn't seen before. Before, you'd have had to be done in a book format. Then people would have had to read the book, or to have coaching, they would have had to be in the same place. Now it can be done by Skype and all over the world, and information can be shared and so on. So it's very, very different. So I imagine that's where a lot of things will go in the future, more and more, how technology is changing that. And we're already seeing that. If we look at a very brief timeline in history, and we look at where OCD treatment really became effective, well, you've got the likes of obviously exposures, which is just facing fears for what they are. I mean, all this stuff has been around for thousands and thousands of years, in the sense, if we look back at the Greek and Roman philosophy and the Stoicism and so on, it's dismantling our irrational beliefs, how we perceive things, the only things that make us afraid, breaking those down, facing fears, and seeing fears aren't actually what we think they are. They're not as scary as we think. So doing that really gets under it and changes that. However, in terms of really understanding it, the likes of Albert Ellis, who founded CBT, was obviously pioneered and took things to another level in terms of how we were dealing things before that. And still, sadly, I see so many people coming to me that are spending so long focusing on the past to get better through psychodynamic therapy and so on, which is not effective for OCD. It's not the path to take. You want to be going down, changing your beliefs in the now. That's what's disturbing you. It's how you believe and what you think about something in this moment. So obviously Albert Ellis was a pioneer in that. And then obviously over the last decade, there's been a lot more OCD information and research and more things like that, and that's changing things. And that's what I aim to do. I'm on a sort of a 10-year goal to try and really put OCD on the map and keep putting out information that cuts through all the nonsense that we often read and really gets to the things that work, and helping more and more people recover around the world, which I'm trying to do, trying to really change things for OCD, because I believe it's been in the darkness for far too long. Although it's come out of the darkness in the last decade, it's still way too in the dark. There's plenty of people who have killed themselves over POCD all over the world because they've got no idea they've got OCD. There's plenty of people with OCD that know they've got OCD but can't get better because they don't know how. So there's all kinds of obstacles. So in terms of where we're at, we're already, miles from where we were if we go back to the Middle Ages and the likes of those times. If you had told somebody in confidence, I think I'm possessed by a devil, was an OCD thought, I don't think that would have gone down too well. So times have drastically changed since then. We're already in a far place from there. But in the future, I think you're going to definitely see, and the future speeds up very quick. We didn't expect to see the changes that we've seen already, how quickly they've adapted, changed our lives, it's in terms of technology and how we use it. So I think for OCD, you're definitely going to see that. It's going to be moving down that route, and I'll be aiming to work very closely with virtual reality and the likes of that technology to make recovery more easily accessible, faster, all these different things. I'll be looking to do a lot with that over the next coming years. And I think that the main thing that you want to think about is when you've got OCD and you're thinking, God, life's so difficult, when's this ever going to get better? All this adversity that we're facing. You've got to think of the times that we're living in. Things are changing so fast. Things are, you're getting one. I always say this to people: the difference between someone saying I can't handle this anymore and I feel super empowered and I can handle this. Well, the difference between I can't handle this and I can handle this is about a millimetre apart, and it's usually just a few things that change your perception. And we can obviously bob in and out of that constantly, back and forth, and that changes as we're going along, as we're learning different things. And you've got to think of the times we live in. Things are changing so much that we could be in a position where things are very, very different, even in situations where, in terms of medication, in terms of the future. Now, you don't need, in future technology, now you don't need to wait for any of this. Like I said, if there was a pill in front of me that cured OCD today, I can't imagine it making much difference to my life today. So there was a time where I would have given pretty much every limb to have that pill. So times change, our perceptions change. So you've always got to take things one day at a time, roll with it, rather than trying to fix everything suddenly, all in an instant, because that causes a lot of stress on yourself, and it causes a lot of problems. You want to go with this as a one step at a time journey, because it very much can feel overwhelming if you look at it like that. Okay, let me just have a look at some of these questions, if there are any. Let's have a look. How do you feel about medical marijuana and OCD in any research? Well, I've talked about this a reasonable amount on here about psychedelics and medical marijuana, CBD and so on. I don't think CBD is certainly not a miracle cure. We're living at a time where there's obviously a lot of money for people to make, so CBD is going to be pushed as that. Also, people are always looking for another way to feel a bit better and try something new. So CBD is going to always be talked about a lot in forums and support groups and so on. CBD will have its bonuses, same as there's a guy who lives with MS in my building, has been smoking a lot of marijuana for many years, and says that without that, he doesn't know how he would have gone on. It was fantastic for his symptoms. Of course, there's huge benefits, but for OCD, CBD, for some people benefits, some people not so many benefits. It's a thing like that. I'm not an advocate of CBD. Not actively promoting using CBD by any means. I think with the likes of marijuana, it's easy with drugs and alcohol or any of these things to try and escape or to get away from feelings with these. And the problem with marijuana is you get a lot of people, being psychotic, developing all kinds of different things, and then that becomes an OCD fear too. What if I'm stuck like this? What if my thinking's changed because of smoking marijuana and so on? LSD, psychedelics, I think there'll be a lot of, I can imagine that moving into the medical stream, especially with treatment for a lot of mental illness in the future. There's obviously with the uses of, say, magic mushrooms, very good for creating shifts in perception in terms of seeing the self differently and disconnecting with a lot of the things that go on in our head in terms of how we see ourselves and view ourselves. You hear great stories, you hear horrendous stories, you hear a whole mixture. I don't advocate either at this point in time, but I say that I do think that they are going to be the things that develop. I'm not, although I don't advocate them, I'm not anti them in the sense like, it's the worst thing ever. I think it's got huge bonuses, the likes of these, but I would not recommend them for OCD people because of all the problems that they can cause as well. developing other disorders or really anxious states and panic attacks and so on, but they do have their huge potentials as well. So all of these different things, there are pros and cons. I would certainly, with the likes of marijuana, I've never seen anyone have huge benefit from smoking marijuana for OCD. In terms of where I was talking about psychedelics, I'm talking about in a microdosing format. And again, this is not something I recommend. It's not something that is needed for OCD recovery. Neither marijuana or psychedelics are needed for OCD recovery at all. Everything you need to get better from OCD recovery I cover here, and in the reading list that's been laid out for thousands of years in Greek and Roman philosophy, and through the likes of Albert Ellis, who's put it a lot more on the map and made it much more easier to understand. Let's have a look here, so if there's any other questions. Do you think OCD exists in people with the same personality traits, such as highly sensitive? Well, OCD flourishes in black and white rigid thinking. Think of OCD like a plant. Soil it grows in is black and white rigid thinking. We want to get you used to the uncertainty, living in that grey zone, living in that section there, and getting comfortable with that. If you're very black and white rigid, I'm good, I'm bad if I do this, this is terrible, this is awful if I do that, that causes a huge amount of problems. Very, very rigid. So it's about creating flexible thinking. That's what I'm trying to do. Flexible beliefs, make things more flexible. That's the whole goal of uncertainty. Everything we're trying to feel and embody, to feel, get comfortable with uncertainty instead of black and white rigid. Okay, let's have a look. What do you do if you don't remember what you prayed to God and are afraid if you prayed something wrong? I will cover that in a religious OCD Instagram live, because there's quite a lot to cover on that. I overthink everything and anything, and I've tried my best to just go with the flow, but up to now I'm not winning. That's because you're probably still scared, and you're probably still very engaged and locked in, and without an understanding of how to sort of distance yourself from that and change your beliefs relating to that in relation to your fears, because the fears keep the cycle going, because it keeps it sort of, it's like the fuel for it. Until we break that down, then the cycle kind of goes habitually on its own in our head. It's very hard to change that. So it definitely is something that without a better understanding of things keeps going. If we're scared of something, the cycle goes, because it's how we handle the cycle, and then it becomes almost automatic and it doesn't break down. So that's what I cover in coaching, both in the group one-to-one formats, and get under that. But I know exactly that feeling. I was in that for many years, being locked in that cycle, going around and around and around. Thank you for making a religious. Yeah, I'm definitely going to cover the religious theme. It's very, very common. I'll be covering that. I mean, it was obviously the most common OCD form, but probably when we go back a couple of hundred years ago, society was more religious. So there was a lot of fears relating to going to heaven and hell. Blasphemy OCD was one of the most common OCDs. Today, POCD, due to the sort of media witch hunt on that theme, on that in life, is very much the most common but less talked about theme. Is it normal for your fears of possessions to appear in your dreams? As an example, if you're scared of hurting your family, absolutely. You'll have sexual harm, physical harm, dreams all the time. Very common with anxiety. With the way we get under that is viewing them differently, learning to distance ourselves with the thoughts. But sometimes they still lock, and we do need the unconditional self-acceptance, as displayed by Albert Ellis, to get underneath that, because they can lock on and we feel guilty for as if we did that, and then we start replaying the dream in the morning, back and forth. Did I do that? Did I think that? Was I thinking this? Was it me? Was it the dream? And we get stuck in a cycle. All right, guys, thanks a lot for watching this Instagram live, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks, guys.